Hello everyone, this is Beastly Eel here, and in today's video I'm going to be ranking all of the MCU movies and shows, ranking them in order, only 36 of them. So, just so you're aware, so I will not be including the Netflix shows, so all the Defender saga. I'm not going to be adding Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Agent Carter, Inhumans, I believe that covers everything. All those will not be covered inside of this, but everything else will be added into it, into consideration. So the Incredible Hulk will be in this. The SpiderMan movies will be in this as well. Just the ones with Tom Holland, though, just so you're aware. So we're going to get right into it, and I'm going to be ranking right now the top 36 to 31. So just those rankings right now. So the very bottom of this list, there were two movies that I thought were the worst of the MCU. They were both in the same phase. They both kind of weren't that great. So 36 on this list was Thor: The Dark World. So this is where we had the Dark Elves come in, and they're in the comics are supposed to be this great and powerful race, and they were defeated by a bunch of mortals who don't know what they were doing and had a handmade teleportation device, where they literally teleported pieces of his body across the realms, and we were supposed to be okay with it. Kind of bothered me. Wasn't a big fan of it. Didn't like it for that reason. And the story wasn't that great because they made such a great villain be so easily defeated. It was kind of sad, really, to be honest with you. Number 35 on this list, we go right into the worst Iron Man movie, in my opinion, which was Iron Man 3. So one of the big things had to do with the fact that we have the fake Mandarin, which was just awful in general because we got so excited about the Mandarin and we didn't even get it. So that's kind of depressing. And then we also have Tony Stark. The one good thing about it is we get to see Tony Stark being vulnerable, specifically with PTSD. On what happened in the Avengers. But what irritates me is at the end of it, so we see Pepper Potts become this superpowered being, which he then somehow miraculously, outside of the camera, fixed her. And then he gives up all of his Iron Man suits. He destroys them all. And we're supposed to be just okay with it, and that's it. Even though we know he comes back. It was supposed to be like the end of him, and it was just the beginning. The story overall wasn't that great. The villain was at best. It was just exploding heat people. We had the Iron Patriot, which was ridiculous. There wasn't a lot of good in that movie, in my personal opinion. Moving right along to number 34. 34 on this list was the Eternals. So the Eternals, here's my issue with it. The movie wasn't horrible, but I felt like it was only half done. What I mean by that was this was like a great movie to get set up for another movie, but the movie itself didn't really go anywhere. The deviants, weren't really the bad guys, and they were slowly killing the Eternals, but then were beaten up easily by Athena, and then they decided to not destroy the planet, and then now they're being taken away, and that's just how it ends. It was a lot going on, and a lot of it didn't make sense, and it didn't go it just didn't flow, in my opinion. The movie itself felt like it ended abruptly. There was supposed to be more, and we didn't get it. That's kind of what I felt, anyway. I mean, you might have a different opinion, but that's how I feel. So we're moving right along to number 33. 33 on this list is going to be Black Widow. So part of this had to do with the fact that it did take so long to come out, and I tried to not make that a factor, but it kind of was. That was part of it. The only redeemable character in this whole thing was Red Guardian. Everyone else was kind of at best. And her sister was definitely interesting as well. But that was it. I mean, it was just it was a story that takes place before she dies, obviously, and they heavily put in death-defying things that could have killed her, and I felt like they were trying to make us think that she was going to die, and we knew she wasn't going to because it's a prequel, and we know what happened to her later on in the movies. So it was just kind of a disappointment. Taskmaster wasn't all that great. of a reveal. Turns out to be just a young woman who is kind of partially controlled by robotic technology, which is not really what Taskmaster is. He's a mercenary that has the ability to manipulate his body to act in the same way as others without superpowers, which did happen and did very well. The action scenes, I do say, but the character overall not as good. It was kind of a disappointment. And again, the big thing was like her falling and almost dying. All that stuff was like, it all felt like it was just being like forced, and it really didn't work well. I think prequels are not the best Marvel could do, and I think they proved that with Black Widow. We got to kind of stick to the timeline so that way we're not like trying to force things to go in a correct way. Number 32nd on this list is another Iron Man movie. It's Iron Man 2. All right, so here's my thing with it, okay? It had funny moments, but when you look at it compared to the rest of the MCU, it didn't have a great villain. Whiplash should have been much better. I really wish he would have became Crimson Domino, but none of that happened. I mean, I really, really wanted a strong villain, and he decides to blow himself up. I mean, that's one of the things I have a problem with Marvel right now, is that they're killing all these great villains, and they're keeping some of the crappy ones. But like I mean, he was a good villain. I mean, he was a jerk. He was an engineer. He was able to manipulate the technology that Tony Stark was able to do, and make it, better at the time. And he needed both him and War Machine to team up to take him out. I mean, that's a great villain. And then, I mean, we had an introduction to Black Widow, which was okay. Justin Hammer was depressing. And it was just about him dying. Or, I'm sorry, Tony Stark dying. And it obviously stopped him from dying. But it was another one that just felt like they were trying to force it, and it just didn't work out, in my opinion, because of that. And again, the story itself was just him going back to his old ways because he was dying, which kind of ruined his story, in my opinion, a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, he's past that. Like, just because he's dying, he wouldn't stop doing that. I mean, he'd still be arrogant and everything else, but let's be realistic here. At this point, he should be much better off, but oh well. Now, 31st on this list is going to be Captain America: Civil War. Now, here's my issue with this movie. The team-up overall, like the characters in it, thought were great. But like the concept of the Civil War is what bothered me, because it's so different from the comic books. The comic books was they were registering super beings and making sure we can keep tabs on them. This, they're being forced to work for the government, which is completely different. It wasn't as good of a premise. I mean, it still had the sides of Iron Man versus Captain America. There was no death in it, which kind of, I know it sounds bad. I mean, all we did was have War Machine get paralyzed, which is fixed later on with technology. Not fixed in the sense that he gains the power to move his legs again, but he has technology to help move his legs so he can walk. But yeah, it just... The concept was just the fact that it was because of Steve not telling Tony that is of how and why his parents died, which was kind of weird in itself. And then Baron Zemo, just a regular human, pissed off and wanted to destroy the super beings. It just didn't. It bothered me. It wasn't the concept I was looking for, especially in the Civil War. Like, if you got rid of the name Civil War and you just put a Captain America Divided or something else like that, I think it would have been so much better, because I wouldn't have had that concept in my head that it's a Civil War. And that, because of that, that ruined the movie for me just enough that I didn't want it to be that high. And that was part of the reason why it's number 31 on this list. All right, and we're going to be moving right on for the top 30 to 21. So number 30 on this list is going to be The Incredible Hulk. Now, the reason why it's so low on this list has many different reasons. So it felt like it was so distant from the MCU, and it took so long for us to realize, or I shouldn't say realize, but so long for us to know that it was actually canon, since they changed the actor from Edward Norton to who it is now, and Mark Ruffalo. And it just, part of that made it feel so disconnected from the MCU. I mean, we didn't see Abomination, we didn't see General Ross, or even Betty Ross. So we didn't see anybody else except for Bruce Banner. Overall, the story was good. It was about him trying to, control his powers and get rid of it, and the government basically saying that it's their money, they can do what they want. And Abomination was a great villain. It was a great match to go against the Hulk. Overall, I thought it was a decent movie, but because of the change in actors, because of how long it took for the MCU to really pull it back in to the MCU canon, or at least make it feel like it was. I mean, only just recently in Phase 4 have we seen Abomination return, and this one came out in Phase 1. In fact, it was the second movie. Just kind of things that were kind of left out in the open. Just kind of sad. All right, moving on to number 29 on this list. So the ones after, from this point on, including the Hulk too, I enjoyed the movies. I mean, they had some issues I had with them, but overall, I did enjoy the movies. It's just now it's getting to the fact that which ones did I like more, and which ones did I feel like worked best, and how much did I, kind of feel and about the movie, how close it was related to the comics, and was just entertaining overall. So number 29 on this list is Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I thought Guardians of the Galaxy 1 was good. Definitely a shocker for me, but the second one tried to do so much of what the first one was doing, and then they added in the fact that, Quill's half celestial, and he's Ego's son, and we have him have those powers, but then don't have those powers anymore. He destroys an entire planet, specifically a celestial, which we learn later from the Eternals. But it wasn't as good. I felt like it was trying too hard with the jokes and everything else, and the fact that they were splitting up, then getting back together. Kind of a letdown. That, and also it was a prequel in the sense that, this comes out obviously before Infinity War, but in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 it takes place right after Guardians of the Galaxy 1, and a lot of time has passed since then. So it's just, I don't know, it's one of those things where it stinks in that way. And I just thought overall the fact that he's a Celestial when he's actually not in the comics, I think that kind of really messed with me, because that makes him much more significant when he's really not supposed to be, in my personal opinion, compared to the rest of the MCU. So Star-Lord needs to kind of go back to being just Star-Lord. The most hated man in the universe. Number 28 on this list is actually Age of Ultron. And here's my issue with it, was the fact that we had Ultron. He was way too trying to be funny. And not enough just murderous robot, I felt. I felt there was a lot less murderous robot than there should have been. Like, there should have been a lot more of that. We also have him teaming up with humans, which would almost never be the case, because he hates humans. We see him get destroyed, which is sad. We lose a great villain, and it's kind of just depressing. The idea of him being created by Bruce Banner and Tony Stark doesn't ruin anything for me, even though it's Hank Pym in the comics along with Tony Stark. But and it actually takes on Hank Pym's personality, which is why he's so unstable. But the personality of both Tony Stark and Bruce Banner work because, they are both unstable. I was disappointed in the villain. The Vision was awesome to be added into. Scarlet Witch was great to be added into it, but it was just weird that she was added in that way, and that she was teaming up with Ultron along with Quicksilver. That kind of bothered me in my own personal head, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't an awful movie. It just, those are where I felt like it fell flat, in my opinion, where we didn't get to see a lot of the good, I guess you could say. of that villain. Number 27 on this list is actually Hawkeye. So here's the thing. I did actually enjoy Hawkeye. It's not that I didn't enjoy it, but when you think of it compared to all the others, it was just kind of a run-of-the-mill superhero movie. It sounds stupid when I say it, but what I'm getting at is it wasn't exciting. It kind of was just like the status quo. It was, a good guy trying to get redemption for the bad stuff he's done. We've seen it a million times, and it wasn't all that exciting overall. I mean, we had some great things like we have Vincent D'Onofrio reprising his role as the Kingpin, which is phenomenal. But that and Echo are kind of the only great things about that the series. I mean, we don't even, or at least me personally, I'm not a big fan of Kate Bishop's character from what we've seen so far. I mean, compared to all the other characters in all the other shows and movies, it's just she's missing something. Maybe it's because it's not really her origin story. It's just the fact that now she considers herself being able to be trained as an Avenger, but she's just not where she needs to be yet. And it's because of that. And her going against Kingpin and technically winning was kind of, I mean, it was luck, which is why I'm not as disappointed about it as I would be if she beat him easily. But just the sheer fact that we see her not being the full hero yet. And I think we're going to be seeing it in the future, just not yet, which is why for that series, I put it at 27. Next on this list is another Disney Plus show, Falcon and Winter Soldier. This one came right after WandaVision, and I think that's where it was the downfall. So in the original distribution of this, it was supposed to come out before WandaVision, but because of COVID and everything else and production errors, they were pushed back, and I think that's what kind of ruined it, where it was WandaVision was so different, and then we have Falcon and Winter Soldier, that once we have Falcon and Winter Soldier, it's back to the old way of good guys versus bad guys and them chasing them, trying to get them. They lose originally, and then they fight again and win. So it was a lot of the same, which is kind of where it fell flat, where it wasn't. It was where it was supposed to be based on what it was, but because it was such a drop, in my opinion, from WandaVision, it gets so low because it just doesn't stand out because of that. It's at a time where it should be better than that at that point. Number 25 on this list is Thor. So Thor is 25 on this list because here's the thing, it was better than Thor 2, The Dark World. But this one doesn't hold up as much as it did in the beginning. It was a good movie, great casting, do not get me wrong on that, but it was kind of very Shakespearean when we were in Asgard, and I think it was because of that where it made it sort of cheesy, where now we have Asgardians kind of drinking, partying, and everything else, where in that it was, well, prim and proper, and I think it just doesn't hold up as much as it did in the when it first came out, and that's why it's 25 on this list. Still a good movie, don't get me wrong. But just felt like there were certain tropes in there, like, the hero losing his powers and having to become worthy again. I mean, again, I get it, because it is part of the mantra and everything else, and it is the introduction to the character, so it makes sense to do it then. It just now, compared to all the other movies and shows, that's why it's where it is. Number 24 on this list was another prequel that kind of bothered me, which was Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel, overall, the movie was not bad. I thought it was the best rendition of Captain Marvel so far. I liked it. I liked her character in this much better than what we saw in Endgame, because that kind of wasn't her best performance. So I'm hoping to see better from her now. But the movie was good overall, but it was just a prequel. It was in the 90s. So we have Coulson, we have Nick Fury, and we're seeing them and acting different. And I know it's years in the past, but still, prequels bother me, and I do apologize if you think that they're important. To me, they're not. That's kind of why I have an irritation with it. It's okay to have the beginning of a movie be a prequel, meaning it's setting up the movie. That's fine, but when we're not, it ruins some things for me. And the fact that the Skrulls were the good guys kind of bothered me too. I mean, they make great movie stuff, but the Skrulls are evil. They're meant to be evil. We have the Super Skrull try to take over Earth and kill the Fantastic Four. How do we have that with a race of people that are good guys and are working with Earth. Kind of tough to do. That's, again, not awful. That's why it's number 24, 24 on this list. Yep. So moving on to 23 is Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, the one downfall I have of this movie, the very one, and they explain it obviously in the movie, but I just didn't like it for that reason, was the fact that the villain was good, the story overall was fine, didn't dislike it or anything like that. It was just the fact that we have him with a great suit, and then he gets put back into the other suit, and I know it's kind of explained like it's taken away from him and everything else, but it's kind of like a setback where it didn't need to be. Like, instead of doing like an origin story where we bring him back in time, they kind of brought it into the future, and it was fine. It was just the suit was the part that got me, was the fact that he still could have kept the suit and it still would have been a good movie, in my personal opinion. And I think that's just the only reason that it's so low on this. And granted, again, it's low on this list just because it wasn't as exciting as some of the other movies that I'm going to be and shows I'll be talking about. It was just lacking some stuff, and that was one of it. That and Uncle Ben. We don't have him ever talking about an Uncle Ben, but that's also will be explained later. But that was the reason why it was so low. Sorry, number 22 on this list is going to be Miss Marvel. Now, Miss Marvel was slow to start. It didn't have as many exciting parts as some of the other shows. The story overall, arching was good. Like, I liked it. We get the introduction to mutants and everything else in this. We also have a setup to the Marvels, which is nice. But the story was kind of just, like, broken up. And not in a cohesive way where it was, like, action, non-action, and everything else. And we didn't really get to see her having to go against somebody of her caliber, power-wise, and I think that was kind of a downfall. Like, we saw a little bit with her and Conran, but let's be honest, it really wasn't a fight. She was just stopping him from destroying the entire city. So we missed that kind of growth for her, and then maybe we'll see it in the Marvels, but it's because of that the show named after it really doesn't have her becoming herself, in my opinion, fully to the extent where it was entertaining and exciting as some of the other shows and movies. It's just my opinion. I'm sorry. So number 21 on this list is Ant-Man and the Wasp. I thought this was a good movie. We get introduced to a lot of new characters. We have Ghost. We have Giant Man. I believe is his name in it. Or Goliath. Sorry, Goliath. I knew there was a name I was missing. So Goliath, and we have these great things about it. Overall, it was a lot of just joking around, a lot of sight gags. I know Ant-Man and the Wasp is supposed to be funny, but it was trying too hard, especially with the whole couldn't get his right size, was kind of bothering me a little bit. It's still not a bad movie. I mean, Wasp is awesome. I think she's definitely the better one than Scott Lang, personally, but definitely a great addition to the MCU is the Wasp, and so hopefully we get to see more of her, obviously. And that's, like I said, it wasn't a bad movie. It just wasn't as good as some of the others, and that's why it's on the list where it is. And that's kind of where it wraps up for the top 21. So we're going to be moving right along to the ranked 20 to 11 spots on this list for the MCU. And these movies overall were good movies. I did enjoy them, but they just weren't as exciting as the last 10 or the top 10 on this list. They were not bad. They just... Well, I'll just go right into it. Number 20 on this list is Captain America, the First Avenger. So this was a great origin story. We got to see him in the past being Captain America and how he is. We get to see a great character like the Red Skull, and the fact that they're going against the Germans in World War II and then Hydra, and just showing the interaction of what it was like back then was nice overall. And we get to see a great character be developed, and also some other side characters introduced as well. Bucky, and also Agent Carter. And we also have, what's his name? Stark. Howard Stark, sorry. So, they're there, and it's not a bad movie, but like I said, it just wasn't as exciting compared to some of the other movies. But granted, it was part of the first phase, so it's because of that it just wasn't able to push the envelope as much as some of the others. Moving right along to number 19 is the very first movie in the MCU, and it's Iron Man. Now, great movie, especially for its time. It was a great introduction to the MCU overall. It was just great overall, and we get to see the beginnings of the MCU. But again, because it's the beginning of the MCU, they're really not pushing the boundaries where they do later on. It's still a great movie, do not get me wrong. I mean, we have the introduction to Iron Man, Tony Stark, Pepper Potts, Happy, Stark Industries in general. We have Rhodes, but unfortunately he gets, replaced in the second movie with Don Cheadle. And that's like the only bad thing about it. And it's not because the actor wasn't good. It just had to do with the fact that they changed the actor in the next movie. And that kind of messed up a little bit. But overall, I mean, that's the only complaint I have about that movie. It was good overall, and it was also the start of it. Now, next on this list is number 18, which is the last one of Phase 1 that's on this list, which is the Avengers, the first one. So this was a great beginning because we got to see a group of heroes team up in a way that we've never seen it before in live action. And it's because of that, it was a really determination of the success of the MCU, where people wanted to see more of it because it was such a great movie and it didn't flop. You know what I'm saying? So because they continued, because of this team up, they, I myself included, thought it was going to have a great run. I mean, look at it; it's still going on to this day. It was a great beginning show of the rest of the universe too. I mean, we get to see the kind of expansion of it, and we see more heroes being added and possibly being seen later, which is nice overall. Number 17 on this list was a surprise for me, meaning when it first came out, I didn't think it was going to be all that great because it was a bunch of characters I didn't even know about. So this is number 17 on this list, and it's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. So this was such a great movie for a lot of reasons because it kind of broke down the barriers of what it's supposed to be a superhero movie, where it was funny, it was dark, it was creepy, it was, a little bit sexual, a little bit, innuendos like you wouldn't believe. We have a character who just says, "I am Groot." I mean, it's just awesome overall, and I thought it was just excellent because of that. The story overall didn't really add much to the MCU overall. I think in the beginning it wasn't supposed to be part of the MCU, and then it got kind of really canon because of the success of it, which I get. And it's because of that where I'm like, okay, I get it. It's cool. But definitely a surprise for me, I would have to say, which is why it's high on this list. I mean, it was a good movie overall. Number 16 on this list is on this list because I thought it was a hilarious introduction to the character, and it is AntMan. So AntMan was so funny it worked because maybe it was because it's Paul Rudd, maybe it's just because of the acting in general. I just thought it was awesome seeing him, be funny, but also in a way where it worked as a superhero and it works for his character because he is a joke. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what made the movie so well done. Was because of that. I mean, the fighting scene where they throw a Thomas the Train Engine at him. I mean, it's stuff like that that's just funny, where it makes sense on why it was being done because they were tiny size. But yeah, it's just an odd thing overall, but definitely interesting. And like I said, that's why it's number 16 on this list. All right, we're moving right along to number 15. This is Captain America Winter Soldier. So this was a great introduction because we get to see the fact that Bucky Barnes is alive and that he's a sleeper agent, killed Tony Stark's parents. We also get to see the introduction to Hydra at its strongest. We also see it get taken down as well, but we get to see how integrated Hydra was. So it went from this, World War II to being infiltrated inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. and grew together, and now Hydra was this big thing that was able to almost take over the entire world. And this is also where we get introduced to they make a lot of Easter eggs, especially on the list. So there's people on the list, like we already see Doctor Strange on that list at that time, which was before he was introduced, and Kamala, a Middle Eastern girl with some things that popped up. So it's an algorithm, an AI system that was introduced that would take out all potential threats on the planet. And just seeing the fight between Captain America and Bucky was awesome, and the fact that Bucky kind of realizes, he's got to be good type of thing. We also get the introduction to Falcon, which is awesome. Um, it was a good movie. I did like it. Very, very good, I have to say. I'm sorry. Number 14 on this list is Spider-Man Far From Home. So this was a great introduction because we get to see the idea of the multiverse being hinted, but actually not being a part of it. So Mysterio being a liar and a con artist, also, a special effects artist. He was good overall. The only reason why I think it's so low on this list, because the story I thought was great, but Mysterio himself as a main villain ruins it just a little bit for me because he's just smoke and mirrors. And I think that's where I kind of not a big fan of Mysterio and why I just don't think he holds up as a villain, which is why he kind of brought the movie down. But the story itself was great. We get to see him kind of try to be the hero and everything else. Then we also see the spill of Spider-Man being the killer, and also his identity was being taken, which I think is awesome too, or exposed, I should say. And it's because of that, he has to change his ways, which I think is just a great concept in general. So that's why it's 14 on this list. Sorry. Number 13 on this list is going to be Thor: Love and Thunder. Now, my issue with this movie has to do with the fact that, yes, it's dealing with trauma, and I'm not saying it's not a good movie. I'm saying that compared to the third movie, Ragnarok, it just doesn't hold up as much. And it was trying too hard to be as successful and as funny as it, where, in my opinion, because of the character or the villain they had, it should have been much darker. Still, great movie overall. It had some great fight scenes. It was funny in some of the right places, not always. We have Jane Foster. My issue with that was they killed her off too quickly, but that's a whole nother thing. But that being said, just so you're aware, that's where I feel like it fell short. And it killed the Gore the God Butcher too quickly, in my opinion. So it was a little disappointing. I wish we could have seen him butcher more people, or more gods to be specific, but we didn't get that. But anyway, moving on to number 12 on this list. This was another one that was a surprise for me. Shang-Chi and the Ten Rings. I don't know what I was expecting. I think because he was a character that was so not well known for me, and I consider myself a big comic book fan, and the fact that I didn't know him, you know what I mean, just made me think automatically that it wasn't going to be as good as the others. But it was definitely entertaining. It was well done. I thought the character arcs were nice. If I had to make a complaint, the fact that Kimmy was the one that actually did the most damage to the creature in the throat, that might have been the only really thing that I was super against. Everything else I didn't have a problem with. The Ten Rings were cool. They're much different than the comic books, but I'm not mad about it. It worked for the story. And we get to see another dimension, which is nice. Another reality, I guess is the best way to put it, which is nice to see as well. So number 11 on this list was definitely a trippy one. You definitely wanted to see this movie under the influence. Was Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange was such a good movie because we get to introduce to magic overall, which was the first rendition of it. We get to see some great fight scenes. We see multiple dimensions being talked about, the multiverse slightly, mostly talking about multiple realities. We also have Dormammu in the dark dimension, which is a whole nother thing that's going to be added in later, which I think is going to be awesome. Overall, it was just a good movie. I mean, not a lot of bad stuff to say about it. I mean, the only thing I would say is the fact that we don't get to see a lot of his training, where he's just reading. We don't get to see him do a lot of the magic stuff in this movie, which is, I think, the only thing I would say that would make it be a negative. But yeah, so that's so far. That is the top 11. I mean, from the 11 down. So now we're going to be moving on to the top 10. All right, we're going to get right into the top 10 on this one. So number 10 on this list is Black Panther. A great story overall. A great comeback story. We get to see Killmonger, which is another great villain that we get to see. Disappointed that he did get killed, or died, I should say. Great overall. We get to see the tribal and primal part of Wakanda, but we also get to see the tech and the advanced technology part of it as well. We see some great fighters and everything else. It's just overall a great movie as an origin movie. Definitely one of those that is actually, in my opinion, very good. So I made it to the top 10. So number 9 on this list is one of the TV shows that I was excited about, and it didn't get what I thought I wanted, but I got what I needed out of this, and it's Moonlight. So it was much more psychological than I expected it to be, a lot less supernatural, but I am not mad about it. I thought it was greatly portrayed. Also, the mental illness was perfect. It was portrayed excellently. We had the difference in the costumes based on the personality that was in control of the body. We have Khonshu, which I think is a hilarious character. We had Dr. Harrow, who wasn't even a doctor in this movie, in the show, when in the comics, he was a character that was only in the very beginning, who was a doctor who then got paralyzed on the left side of his body, or is in extreme pain on that side of the body. And they changed his character in a way that was so well done. I mean, overall, there was a lot of great things in it. It was overall a very great show. But just as all weird as it sounds, even though it's definitely in my top 10, obviously, it just didn't stack up to the top 8. And number 8 on this list is actually Endgame. Now, there's a reason why this particular one is lower, because I did think this was a phenomenal movie, and especially when it first came out, I thought it was amazing. But after watching it a few times and inside compared to the rest of the MCU, it was a lot of rushed stuff. And like all the characters, they spent a lot of time with each character, and I think because of that, we lost a little bit. And that's just, I'm nitpicking at this point, but that's what I'm really like focusing on, in the sense of like that's the big thing, for me anyway. But that it was a good movie, just not the best. I'm sorry. That being said, number 7 on this list is actually What If. So What If is on the list because some of it tied into Doctor Strange in the Multiverse. So we see a lot of the characters in it. We see stories of our characters that we weren't expecting or didn't know could happen. Overall, it was nice. It was individual stories in the beginning, and then it all got tied together, and they got combined in a nice and respectable way, in my opinion. Overall, it was great. I think the other thing, too, was the fact that it wasn't super connected to the MCU. I mean, there were parts of it, like we have, Captain Carter that was in it, which was a big thing. And it was animated. I think that might have been the other thing for me, too, that why it might have been put so, only in 7th, I guess you would say. But I did like it. And also, they did Ultron correct. They made him the badass he's supposed to be, which is why I'm really, really happy about it, because we got the Ultron we should have gotten in the original movie. Now, number 6 on this list, it might surprise some people if you know me, because I talk so much about how great this particular show was, and it was WandaVision, because it was so different. It was the new thing to do in the MCU. I mean, we had a massive change in the MCU because Endgame happened and people are dead. Captain America is retired. We have Iron Man who is dead. Black Widow that is dead. Gamora that is dead. We have dead people on our hands. And this is the first rendition, and it's such a psychological thing because the whole Phase 4 is about dealing with your trauma. And we see the fact that Wanda is not dealing with her trauma well. And it's just done so well in such a comedic way. And we get introduced to one of the greatest characters that I didn't know I wanted, Agatha Harkness. I mean, for goodness sakes, the greatest switch I was not expecting. I mean, that twist alone was just a shock to me. The fact that I didn't know that she was going to be the bad person, and that she was trying to just see how Wanda was able to do what she was doing, was just so well done. And the fact that she was, in there for just 9 episodes, and she now is going to be getting her own spin-off, it's just excellent overall. Definitely excited to see that. But also, That's why it's on this list. I think the reason why it didn't make the top 5 was because it did have some gimmicky stuff. And that might have been like the only reason. Like, I'm nitpicking at this point on these stuff, so it's like that's like the only thing. But a lot of like twists and turns, just for the fact that the Vision that was in her home was not the real Vision, and just the fact that we had the X-Men version of Quicksilver there was just incredible too. Just overall, a lot of great stuff that I thought was nicely put into it. So now we're moving right on to the top 5. Now, this one I thought was going to be in the top 3 because I just loved the movie so much. But when I really started, kind of chopping down and really trying to focus on what I wanted in this and like what I was looking for to be considered the best, definitely deserved top 5. Ragnarok was just an awesome movie. Funny, great, great story. We have Jeff Goldblum in like the greatest character he's ever played. We have the Hulk full on going in a gladiator pit. We have the Valkyrie, who's a drunk. We have Hela, who is just one of the most badass villains we had to deal with. I mean, the thing I have to like deduct, and I'm being very like nitpicky at this point, is the fact that we didn't get to see enough of Hela's destructive ability. We get like a taste of it, but we don't get the whole thing. And I think that might be like the reason why it's 5th. Like, that might be it. Now, number 4 on this list is Avengers Infinity War. Now, this is 4th on this list, and again, a great movie overall. It was a great way to tie everybody together, but I think the part that got me the most was the fact that the villain won. Like, Thanos won. Like, that's the big thing for me right there. And like, Thanos was the winner. And it's just never been done before. And I thought it was done in such a great way where the heroes actually lose, and they lose half of all existence. I mean, I think that was like the biggest loss ever. And we got to see it, and we had to wait a whole year before we knew what happened and how they were going to bring back everyone they did. Just overall great movie. Now, we're moving into the top 3 category. And number 3 on this list is a rather... The 2 of them are very recent movies. So number 3 on this list is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse. Now, apparently, based on like what people are saying, it should be lower on this list, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. We got the taste of the multiverse in such a tasteful way. We got to see the Illuminati, which was another entire universe, and saw them get ripped apart by the sheer power of Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda. I mean, that right there was just phenomenal. I mean, we get to see how powerful she was, and the fact that she's still not dealing with her trauma correctly. And now she's using the dark arts to try to get her kids back. And she does it in such a dark and sinister way that she's willing to kill an innocent child so she could just have a fake family again. And we see how destructive and terrifying she is. And the fact that we're going to most likely see her again, and I cannot wait to do that. Just a great setup overall. And the fact that we have now Doctor Strange teaming up with Shuri in the Dark Dimension, where he now has a third eye. So that's going to be fun too. So all that overall, definitely exciting. I think the only reason why it might have been number 3 on this list instead of number 2 or number 1 was just the fact that I felt like I was expecting more and didn't get everything I wanted. But like, that's even with that, I still had a lot of great stuff that I wanted. And the fact that they didn't introduce any new characters except for America Chavez, which I think is just amazing. The fact that everyone else was just other characters that they've played in the past in other movies, or a variant of it, which I thought was excellent. Overall, great movie. I liked it a lot. Number 2 on this list is definitely deserved to be up here, and it was Spider-Man No Way Home. And that was the 3rd installment. We get the 3 Spider-Man. We get all of the best villains. We have William Dafoe as Green Goblin, we have Doc Ock returning, we have the Lizard from the Amazing Spider-Man, we have Electro from the Amazing Spider-Man, and then we have Sandman from Spider-Man 3. So we have all those, along with the fact that the other two Spider-Men are there. And it was just well done, funny. It was a great story. It's also basically the origin story of Spider-Man, Tom Holland's version, because he lost Aunt May, and that was his Uncle Ben. And it was because of that where it was just such a great movie because of that. I mean, that alone was what made it so awesome, in my opinion. But yeah, definitely, I personally thought it was great, and I definitely enjoyed it. Number one on this list was a show I was very excited about from the get-go and loved it even more because it really was the introduction to the multiverse, and that is Loki. Loki was just excellently done. It had great story. It was compelling. It was emotional. We also get to see the first variant of Kang the Conqueror, and now we're going to see how powerful and amazing this character is. I mean, I'm super excited about it overall. I'm going to be doing this again in the next 30-day challenge with the new stuff and seeing if anything changes. Does certain things not hold up anymore? Like, will Thor Love and Thunder go down more? Or will some of these others go down and something replace it? Overall, we're going to have to wait and see, but definitely liking and loving what I'm hearing about the next couple of phases of the MCU. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is your rankings different than mine? Let me know in the comments below. I'd be curious to hear what you guys have to say. I mean, some of these were definitely like a flip of a coin, but overall the progression of it is correct. So like I might move like one or two with each other, but that's at the most, and nothing super dramatic. But yeah, definitely tough thing to do too. But let me know what you guys think in the comments overall. And then if you like the content you see, please like and subscribe below. Other than that, this is going to be Beastly Eel signing out. Have a great night.